Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very honored. I'm humbled to be here today with you. I'm just another one of you. I'm just a guy who operates a radio. And yet, we found ourselves in the middle of a real big event. But the slide says it all. I just wanted to do field day. I'm going to tell that story tonight. We landed up on the front cover of TCA. We learned a whole pile of things. We made some new friends. It was a phenomenal experience that I hope I never have to repeat again. We all are willing to answer the call when it comes in, and we all never want to have to answer that call. So what I want to do tonight is I want to put you in my shoes as I went through that event. I've put on, the mandatory safety vest and the mandatory radio vest with my mandatory radios because I want you to walk through this journey with me as I go through the presentation tonight so that you understand what I went through. I'm ex-VE3LKV out of Ontario. I lived in Alberta for a while. I moved to Ontario and I came back to Alberta and I'm staying there. I happen to be the assistant EC and I'm also the secretary for the club. Our club does not have 110 members like yours clubs does. I think our numbers are right now just hovering around 30. It's a small club. We do an awful lot of stuff though. I licensed when I was 40. I finally got off my backside and told you earlier on that, I tried to write my ticket when I was 18, but I got distracted because CW was difficult. I'll admit that. As an 18-year-old, I probably got other things on my mind. But I finally did it at age 40, and I wrote my CW endorsement a year later. When I'm not with a radio in my hand, I'm a computer geek, and I'm an electronics geek wannabe. That's to say that I took, all 4 years of electronics in high school, but I don't know really how much of it sunk in. So I know the right end of a multimeter to hold, and I understand the difference between impedance and resistance, which is probably a pretty helpful skill if you're a ham and you're trying to build antennas. But you really don't want to ask me to compute how many millihenries are in a delay circuit. As we've already established, I'm a sideband contester. I haven't done any of that for a few years. I try and do a little bit of it from home. Sometimes I'm a digital contester. I find digital modes fascinating because they allow me to marry two of my hobbies. And as I said earlier, I really got into the hobby just so that I could volunteer in the community. People ask, so who's this guy at the front of the room? What are his qualifications? Well, I don't have any. I'm the same as you guys. I have an advanced class ticket, and I've got my CW endorsement, which I've used once because my examiner said, you have to use it if you do it. And I said, okay, I'll make a contact, and I made my contact. I keep telling myself I'm going to study CW and build that skill back up again. It always seems that something else comes along. As a radio operator, I'm off doing 6 or 10 radio events a year, car rallies, foot races, bicycle races. One of the bicycle races at 85 kilometers, and we had to park my little 4x4, which was just a little bit smaller than a Jeep, up at about 8,500 feet on top of a mountain. It was pretty much a goat trail to get there. But for a guy who's into 4x4ing and ham radio, that's a pretty good marriage for a Sunday. That's not a bad thing to do. And we're supporting 30 operators that are around the base of Moose Mountain, southwest of Calgary. So you get into all kinds of experiences, a commercial band radio on one side and a ham radio on the other side, because not everybody's hams, and you have to try and manage the traffic on two of them. Somebody might say I've got a little bit of chutzpah. I've been activated out on ICS calls a couple of times. In June 2005, the High River floods were there, and I was in the Emergency Operations Center then. The floods were very small compared to what we dealt with last year. And a month later, the floods hit on the Elbow River in Calgary, and I did work with Salvation Army. And I just did my ICS 200 course. This is the obligatory shack picture. So I'm a computing geek, and I'm a ham radio guy. And the yellow box shows you where my ham radio equipment is. For those of you who can't see it from the back of the room, and as a matter of fact, I'm struggling to see it at the front of the room because it's a terrible photo. It shows from left to right a Kenwood TM732A. That's about a 30-year-old dual band radio that does crossband, which I found at a swap meet for a very good price. A Yaesu 857 with all the widgets and add-ons into it, frequency stabilization and such. I've got a power supply in there. I've got a Z100 auto tuner from LDG, a couple of meters and other things. I run exclusively LMR 400 in my shack, and that's mostly because I made an investment at my last shack, and when I moved from Ontario to Alberta, I brought it with me. because we all know that LMR 400 is about $1 a foot, right? But I use patch panels as much as I can. I've made this as bulletproof and as commercial quality as I can. Lightning arresters everywhere. I've learned from my mistakes in the past, and that's the cool thing about this hobby is you can learn from those mistakes as you go along. So this is the corner of the house that my wife didn't know I was putting it up until she came downstairs. And this is the experimenter's corner. So this is the joint experimentation corner of Vince and the rest of the Foothills Amateur Radio Society. And you're looking at 4 sets of VHF multicouplers. I do not know how to tune multicouplers. I don't do that work. There's an IFR sitting there and a communication service monitor. They belong to our club technician. They're still here for me to learn on. And I'm having a whole lot of fun doing that. You can see off on the left my IRLP node. I went through 3 computers to finally find one that would work with the version of Unix, the Linux that comes with it. These are all, fun weekend projects to me. A couple of batteries down the bottom in case the power supply dies. Obviously a home-built power supply, but it's amazing what you can pick up for a switching power supply and drop it into a chassis and make it look nice, and it'll run all day long driving all of these radios. So tonight, I'm here to tell you a story. I'm going to loosely interleave the storyline with some facts and learnings. I want to talk about a little bit of quick history that goes back to the autumn of 2012. I want to talk about a 3-hour road trip trying to get me into an EOC, some stats and numbers about the event, some leadership notes, some things we did well, some things we didn't do so well. I want to talk what it's like in an EOC that's in the middle of an active disaster, and I have lots of pictures to show you about that. I want to talk about the Aries structure that was done provincially during the event and all the frequencies we used and how we organized ourselves. Things to do better next time, and a little bit about the Foothills Amateur Radio Society. So just put yourself in my shoes. You're wearing the vest, you got the radios on, you got microphones dangling off, you got the headset on, you're loaded for bear. And that was me in the EOC that day. Let's go back to the autumn of 2012 though. My wife and I have just relocated from Ontario to Alberta. We haven't bought our house yet. We made an offer on the house and we're waiting for it to close. And we're living in a trailer park, and 2 days after we get to Alberta, 6 inches of snow falls. Welcome to Alberta. About 4 days later is the Foothills Amateur Radio Society meeting, and I'm an ex-member of FARS at this point. I'm going to rejoin the club. Well, as it happens, I bought a home in the hometown of the club where all the meetings are. So I don't have an excuse to not go. That's probably why I'm the club secretary now, because I'm at every meeting. You know how that goes. And Wally is our EC. Oh, that's my next slide. So I'll get to that in a second. But now I live about 15 minutes away from High River. In the 2005 floods, I lived in North Calgary. It was almost a 90-minute drive for me to get there. But I still don't know today, at that time in the autumn, I still didn't know the back roads between my home and the event site, and I sure really don't know the surrounding areas at all. Here's the area I now live in, just to put a map around it. You can see Okotoks in the middle. Anywhere where there's a yellow block, that's ultimately where we end up deploying operators. And there's a couple of spots I didn't show in there because the town names don't appear on the map because you almost blink and you're through them. Green dots show the FARS repeaters where they are, and that doesn't show all of them, by the way, because we have repeaters. The one that you see at Crossfield right at the top of the map is our northernmost repeater. We have repeaters all the way down to the southern Alberta border. Now it's the spring of 2013. Wally's going to Europe in June, and he decides that he probably should have some backup, just in case the water rises. Good idea. And he elects Scott and I as his AECs. I don't know Scott all that well. Scott tells me he's a new ham. He's been licensed for 4.5 years, but he tells me he's a new ham. And so I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but remember, I'm here to volunteer, I'm here to help. That's my motivation to be a ham radio operator and to do MCOM. And it's a couple of weeks before the flood, and I said to, about a month before the flood, I said to Wally, we should really meet the town's incident commander. Do you think you could get him out to our Saturday breakfast? We always meet at the Heritage Inn in High River. It's on a main drag. Food is good, it's reasonably priced. We sit there for 2 or 4 hours and we swap stories about ham radio and all other things of interest. And so Ross comes to the breakfast. We end up going down to the EOC, not unlike the one you have here, with signs hanging and the whole bit. And I'm thinking to myself, it's probably going to be a good idea for me to get to know the guy that I might have to work with one day. And Scott, the same thing. Scott comes along, we all do the tour. The week of the event, all of a sudden heavy rains are predicted. There's still a really high snowpack in the mountains. I wasn't born out here, but I know a big snowpack when I see it, and I know enough to get worried when I see it. But we have a forest meeting on Tuesday night where we're going to talk about our field day planning. And so Scott says, yeah, I'll be the field day captain. We're only a few days from field day. Scott says, I'll be the field day captain. We'll have it at my house. We'll have some steaks and we'll have some pops and we'll have a good time. And I did it last year. My wife and I did it and we really liked it. She wanted to do it again. We're going to do it at Scott's place again this year, as a matter of fact. So Wednesday night, Scott knows that both Vince and Dan are not going to be available this year to help him with field day. Dan is going to go to his property in Montana and do field day in Eureka, Montana. And that, I could tell a fun field day story about Eureka, Montana. It's a really tiny town, and I had a great time down there a few years ago doing field day. And I'm supposed to be doing an event called the K100 out in Kananaskis country. And it's a relay race, and Tom's nodding his head. He knows what it is. It's 125 kilometers long. And it goes from one end of K country to the other. It's drop-dead gorgeous country. It's the highest mountain pass in Western Canada, I believe, and certainly in Alberta is the Highwood Pass. So we're sitting at my dining table just outside my kitchen Wednesday night, and the rain is coming down brutally hard. I mean, it's loud. It's hitting the patio windows just with such velocity. And I'm beginning to wonder to myself if I need to build an ark. I'm beginning to wonder to myself, is the K100 going to get washed out? I didn't think flood. Your mind just doesn't want to go there. Thursday morning, so Wally's in Europe now. And he and I are trading emails, going back and forth, and he's wondering how the field day planning is going, and he's off at his Rotary function, Rotary International, because he was the chapter president at that time. And he and I trade notes. And I've learned to get up in the morning when the rain is heavy and take a look at the flow rate of the rivers, because there's an awful lot of rain. Did I tell you it was raining hard? And so, remember, I've lived in Alberta for 6 or 7 months at this point. I don't know what's normal necessarily, because I've been away for a while. But I get up in the morning and I see a chart that looks like this one. And this chart is showing you what the river level, the primary water level in meters is. And what you're looking at in the chart is the primary water level came up 3 meters in 5 hours. I do not have the flow rate chart. But I was looking at the flow rate chart as I composed this email to Wally. Hey Vince, how's it going? Pretty much. And he's talking to me about the Canada Day contest because we're thinking about doing some contesting when he gets back. Wally, nice to hear from you. We're in the middle of a slow-moving cloud mass forecasted to drop about 100 millimeters of rain in the next days. Hardball-sized hail fell in Coaldale last night. Coaldale is about a 2-hour drive south of us, so significant weather. But you're getting the better end of the weather spectrum. But no worries, the Highwood's only running about 29 cubic meters per second. Remember this chart? I looked at the flow rate chart, and it cut off here too. It cut off because the monitoring station washed away. All of the monitoring stations washed away. I'll get ahead of myself to say that historically, Forest has provided river watch to the town of High River. We put 2 people out at a point on a bridge where there's painted lines. We can see what the height of the river is, and you radio in, and half an hour later all that water's in town, right? So you're always upstream when you're doing this. One of those places that we watched the Highwood River was just south of the town of Longview. That's upstream from us, and it's probably about a 45-minute drive. Well, the place that we watched the river from and did river watch, we called it the Porch. It's a gas well. It happens to be about 50 yards inland from the Highwood River. It's a concrete poured bunker. It's probably 10 feet tall and 20 feet square with a nice metal railing on it, really good. You can tie yourself off with a fall arrest harness. It's nice and safe. We called it the Porch. This flood was so significant that all the concrete was washed away and the well stem was in the middle of the river when the flood had come through. Significant amounts of water. We're talking Niagara Falls amounts of water. If you stood on the shore, on the edge of Niagara Falls, as I have as a Hamilton kid so many times, and you marvel at how 6 feet of water thick is moving over the fall every second, and it's 200 yards wide. A lot of water. So it's now Thursday. I'm at work. Now I've moved across country. It's kind of a new job. Don't know my boss that well. I'm involved in this huge contract RFP thing. Just a little bit of pressure. And I'm thinking to myself, as an employee, I better make a good impression. I better know my stuff. So I'm sitting there with, I don't know where my iPad is right now, but I'm sitting there with my iPad because the news is already out. Canmore, TransCanada has been washed out. Uncertain about roads in other areas. There's news just going all over the place. My Twitter feed is going crazy because, and I only follow like 100 people. Today I maybe follow 110. And I'm following all these people and all these things are coming up. Well, this road is closed. This is washed out. That is washed out. This is going on. And I'm beginning to wonder to myself, well, I'm really glad that I have both my radios in my backpack and all my batteries are charged. In participating in the ProComNet that's hosted out of Ontario, Gary V, 3TTO says, always make sure your radio's batteries are charged. Always make sure you have a current charge on your batteries. You never know when you need them. And for that, just for that reason alone, my batteries stay charged. I don't leave them in the charger all the time. I test them every once in a while, right? I don't want to wear them out. I had both my radios that day. They were fully charged. I never take 2 radios to work. I only ever take 1. Twitter feed is going crazy. Are the K-Country roads washed out? Nobody really knows. It's not like there's big video feeds in the back country. It's a big recreation area. At 10:30, we get a break from all this stuff we're doing, and I take a moment to try and call the town of High River, and I get through to the Emergency Operations Center. And I say, I need to talk to Incident Command. Well, he's kind of busy right now. And I said, well, I'm your ham radio operator. Does he need me? 5 minutes later, the call comes back. No, we're all good. Needless to say, I'm not real focused on my day job, and my new coworkers can see that I'm just a little bit distracted by now. And my boss pulls me aside and says, can you tell me what's going on? And I said, well, you remember that form I signed that said I might be in a conflict of interest and I might have to leave work at the drop of a hat? Yeah, that might happen today. She hadn't seen the form yet. She knew nothing of this. So I had to educate her on the spot. So, just a little bit of personal pressure going there. I don't want to mess up my new job, of course. And at about 1:30, I got the call, and my phone's going crazy. Edmonton's calling me, yeah, Vince, we might deploy you. Yeah, we might not. I was taking so many calls. And finally, at 1:30, I got the call that says, yeah, you're going. I would later learn that as I talked, I did a post-incident review with the incident commander only a month ago. Finally, it was the first time I talked to Ross since the flooding, the IC. And I said to Ross, can you help me understand what happened between 10:30 and 1:30? I said, I phoned at 10:30 and everything was good. All was well. The water was coming up a little bit, but all was well. He says, yeah, pretty much at about 11 o'clock or 11:30, we tried to build a berm out back at Town Hall, but it wasn't happening because the front end loader was starting to get washed away. And when we made the decision to evacuate the Town Hall, we had about 6 minutes. From the point we said go to the point we walked outside into the parking lot, the water was up to our knees. We started to drive our cars away. Some of them floated downstream. We tried to hop in a pickup truck. It got swamped. We were walking out in water up to our chest before he could get rescued. That's how fast the water came up. There's all kinds of stories about how fast the water came up upstream. People making a phone call to somebody 2 miles downstream, farmers talking to each other, get out of your house now. They no sooner put down the phone, the recipient of the call, than the water has broken in their front door and they're clinging on to a banister for dear life. It came up that fast. And nobody saw it coming because the water sensors got torn away. I hope they reinforce those water sensors. Excuse me. So now I'm on the road, the beginning of a 3-hour road trip. I've never been the EC before. So I've got some chutzpah. I've been in EOC a few times. I've got some leadership skills, but I'm definitely feeling like I'm just a little bit out of my element. So what do I have to do? I need people. So I build the initial EOC team out. I make 3 phone calls. I say, I want you and you and you in the EOC with me. Can you get there, please? Bring everything you got. I started up the net while I'm trying to drive home. And I started asking for volunteers. Doug and Andrea hear my call for volunteers, and they carry a membership list with them. They're driving to Osoyoos by way of Highway 3 in the south because Highway 1 is closed, the TransCanada. They're driving to Osoyoos for a family emergency. But until they ran out of cell service, they called everybody they knew to get on the air to start helping us. It was hard for me to get home because the major route into Okotoks has a river running through it. It's called the Sheep River. It was closed. I didn't know why it was closed. I could only imagine it was high water. I haven't lived in the community that long. Excuse me. I haven't lived in the community that long. I don't know my way around. I got to figure out a detour. Well, the easiest thing for me to do is to go back out to the highway and drive around. I get back into town and the roads are plugged again. The cellular networks are jammed. I can't get an SMS message out. Do you all know how SMS works? SMS is just that little piece of bandwidth that the cellular companies like to charge us for that's extra overhead in their systems that they, as I understand the story, and it may be a little wrong here, they don't really use. But it's like 150 bytes of information. It's really super tiny. And at 9,600 bits, that goes through in a blink. My SMSs weren't getting through, let alone my phone calls. And I'm one town away from the problem because everybody's in my town because they've been evacuated. The cellular networks are overloaded. And I'm not even in High River yet. I begin to worry for the safety of my family. I don't know what's going on in my own town. I get home. I was really time efficient because I keep my stuff well organized. I've got a Rubbermaid tub for antenna stuff. I got a Rubbermaid tub for batteries. I got a Rubbermaid tub for my HT, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm on the road in 40 minutes with some granola bars and some bottles of water and a couple days worth of clothing and the stuff I'm wearing with you tonight. As I'm driving, this is taken from the second floor, so I didn't know what the situation was as I'm driving, right? It's taken from the second floor of the High River Hospital at about 3 in the afternoon. Now, water's 3.5 feet deep. Can you see the current around the telephone posts? It's very fast-moving water. Rescues are happening all over the place. This is the main drag through the town of Okotoks. This is taken less than 200 yards from the fire hall that would be our EOC. Today, more or less today, this is what it looks like without the water. It's a huge difference, right? Taken from the highest vantage point in town, Water Tower Hill. Look at the Canada Post box. Today it looks just a little bit drier. Not far from the fire hall. Not far at all from the fire hall. So, I'm leaving Okotoks. I can barely get SMS through. I might be able to make the odd phone call. Excuse me. So I think to myself, the highways are probably jammed. I'm going to use the back roads. I'm not listening to AM or FM radio at this point. I'm on the phone. I'm on 2 meters. I'm trying to get volunteers organized. I'm trying to get my crew together. Well, it's a bad idea to use those back roads because every time I turn, it seems I'm hitting another detour. It's a 15-kilometer trip from Okotoks to High River. So it took me 48 kilometers to get there. So I drove down, and I went over here, and this was closed, and this was closed, and I had to go all the way back up and over to the highway and come down again. Well, then I couldn't get through. I was having trouble getting clearance through the roadblock, but I was able to make a call up to the Provincial Operations Center in Edmonton, who got on RCMP radios to say, let this guy through. Because they're evacuating the town. They're not letting anybody in. I get to the backup EOC, which would become our primary EOC for the event, but it's really the backup because we've evacuated to it now. My arrival is a surprise. They didn't know I was coming. The AEMA didn't have any reliable form of contact because sat phones don't work indoors. I would later learn that AEMA sat phone technology hadn't been rehearsed enough with necessarily all of the field agents. And the guy's sitting there with the sat phone in his hand, and he doesn't realize. He didn't know. These are lessons learned. These guys are now practicing with these things. And that's not all of them. This just happened to some of them. But I walked in, and he said, so who are you here for? And I said, I'm here for you. I'm here for you, Mr. AEMA. He says, no, you're not. You're here for the town. I said, no, Edmonton has sent me because they've lost contact with you. And then he looked at his phone, and he realized what happened. I exceeded the arrival timelines to the Provincial Operations Center. I'm told that somebody walked out of the EOC and into the radio room at POC and said, when can you get the guy into High River? And yeah, he arrived there 5 minutes ago, and the jaw hit the floor. That's the power of teamwork when you're trying to get people through roadblocks. I learned very quickly that I'm in a backup EOC in a building I've never been before. I'm expected to set up 2 or 3 radio stations. I didn't bring enough equipment. I'm able to make a phone call because while the TELUS network was down, the Rogers network was still up. The town used TELUS. So for all intents and purposes, the town was without cell phone connection. My employer's phone was Rogers. I made one phone call, and I didn't want to tie up the network that long. I got a hold of Dan, and you'll hear his name a few times tonight, and said, go to my house. My wife will let you in. Grab everything you see in this room and bring it. I didn't want to be selective in case I forgot something. Grab it all and bring it. He brought an additional 200 pounds of kit. He grabbed all my Rubbermaid bins. Some of them we didn't need. So apparently there's a piece of feed line in the roof, and I had to look for, the orange dot on the ceiling like I see here. I didn't know that. I'd never been in the building before. So I'm in a building exactly like this with drop ceiling tiles. So what do you do to set up antennas? You get mag mounts, and you stick them up on the T-bars. They work great. Just don't get them too near your head because, they're radiating RF. But my UC team is like an hour behind me. My initial impressions as I walked into the UC was everybody seemed out of place. Everybody was working not at their normal workstation with very limited toolkits, with wet clothing. They've survived a flood. They got swept away, and they're here to do a job. The entire town's internet has collapsed. So no TELUS services in town at all, save for a few landlines that somehow miraculously, analog landlines stayed up at the fire hall. The town's servers were laying on the table. They were saved by floodwaters. I later asked the IT guy what those boxes were doing over there, because as an IT guy, I know they're not cheap. He says, the floodwaters were coming. We had to pull them. We don't have a hot site, a failover site. The town of High River does now. There was just limited water coming from the town's reservoir. There was no cellular, as I've mentioned, no sewer. The town's two-way radio system was out. No local AM and FM station. There's a very strong presence for local radio in both Okotoks and High Rivers. The town's under a mandatory evacuation order, and most of it is without electricity. This is a town of 13,000 people. So it's got a reasonable geographic footprint. So, I'd call it a controlled chaos. There were lots of questions and few answers. I'm here to help. How can we help? Where do we need people? I've been in Alberta how long? 6 months, 8 months. I don't know where these towns are. I don't have a visual in my mind. I don't have maps. We're in the backup EOC. We have no maps. I have no internet to pull up the Google. So all I can do is, when I'm told to send an operator to Blackie, to the reception hall to take health and welfare traffic, is hope to heck the operator knows where Blackie is, because I can't direct him. But we start deploying operators, and we set their operator expectation clearly up front. You are walking into a dangerous area. This is what setting expectations looks like. I make no joke about this. You're walking into a dangerous area with no running water and no sanitary sewer. Be prepared. Bring food, bring water. I'll talk about how some people didn't listen to me later on. But it became very quickly to me that we have two objectives that we have to do. We have to help the town, and we have to help Alberta Health Services. You remember the hospital picture with the water? It's in the middle of the flood. We would later evacuate that hospital and take the traffic to help facilitate that, because it was cut off from the outside world too. We had two hospitals that we were protecting, one in a town of Black Diamond and one in High River. But we can't get an operator into the hospital because water is too deep. I had guys saying, yeah, I got great big 4x4s, I'll get through anything. I'm a 4x4 guy. And I said, you're not driving in there. The water is 6 feet deep and fast moving. Do you have a death wish? And they said, no. I can't get a front end loader in there. I can't get anything in there. We tried to get people in by helicopter. We were told they were landing in Okotoks. I deployed an operator to Okotoks. He sat for 9 hours. A bird never landed there. We did not have communication to the helicopter. That's a lesson listed. We will by the time the next one comes around. I stop and take a break because by now Ian and Dan have arrived at the EOC. I go down for some fresh air. Frankly, I'm overwhelmed. All of this stuff is happening. And I run into a coworker. Wayne's there. I turn my head and Wayne is there. I'm like, what are you doing here? You live here. Wayne, how's your house? It's just like, I clicked over that quickly. You're going to run into that. All kinds of stuff arrives, socks and clothing of all kinds, because people are in wet clothes and they're working the UC and they need some dry clothes. They might not fit, but at least they're dry. The fire hall is busy with people. All the fire trucks are out doing rescues. The bays where they fix the trucks and wash the trucks have become temporary medical staging centers. The The people beside me in the EOC don't know about their own families and pets, but they soldier on. And it's overwhelming and humbling all at once. You know, you saw my family photo, right? The dogs. My wife, myself. I would see 2 days later that they were doing animal rescues. And I asked somebody, well, why did you leave your dogs at home? Like, if you had a dog, why would you leave it at home? Vince, you don't understand. And at that time, I didn't. The water came up so quick, we couldn't get in to rescue them. And as a pet owner, I teared up, and I'm teared up thinking about it. You don't want to be in that situation. It's very overwhelming. Here's a 6x6 offloading some people at the fire hall. I'd later see combines, manure loaders, front-end loaders, 6x6s, school buses. They're dropping them off at the fire hall and they're shipping them out to reception halls. There is no organization to this. We're not taking names of where people are going. The water came up too quick to be too organized to know what reception halls people are going to. We would start to play a role in that later on. Helicopters flying all over the place. I counted 6 at one point. And they're landing. This is kitty corner from the fire hall. It's a little park where the market is held. After the flood, tide rolled in with a tractor trailer full of washer and dryers. And they call it the Mobile Center of Clothes Washing Hope or something. And I'm really bungling that. But they rolled that in and they parked it there. This is really a multi-purpose park, and they're using it as a helo landing pad. Any port in a storm, as the expression goes. I've never seen any of this except in a movie. And I'm standing right in the middle of it. It doesn't get much more real than this. I really don't want to sound dramatic, but this is what I'm seeing. Then I get the order. We have to move. We're bugging out. I'm like, why are we bugging out? Because the water is threatening to cut off the last road into town. We have to leave. The only people staying behind now are the firefighters. We start bugging out. We have no contingency for this. Aries didn't. I'm not sure if the town did, but obviously they had a plan in mind. All I know is I'm the guy driving without a map, without ability to get to Google. I got to follow somebody because I don't know how to get there when the roads are closed. I start following the AEMA. It took an hour. It's normally a 20-minute trip because there's a river that runs south of High River that was also flooding and closing the roadway off. So I'm in transit now. And the town's needs are starting to come into focus. So I've been running around the EOC with my radios, and I'm talking to Edmonton on one, and I'm talking to the net on the other, and I'm trying to coordinate all these people. But I'm finally starting to get a picture in my mind of where we need all these people. I'm overwhelmed with all these responses on the radio to help. Edmonton is urgently seeking the incident commander to get a situation report going because they haven't heard from them since they left town hall 6 hours earlier. But I'm traveling apart from the IC, and all I can say is as soon as I get there, I'll get them on a phone for you. It's the best I can do. We stopped at Blackie en route because we had to check in. The AEMA guys had to check in there, and I never did learn why. We leave Blackie and we're trying to turn left on the highway, and this is the major detour route. There is so much traffic. We sat there for 5 minutes. Well, it's AEMA in one seat of the AEMA vehicle, and it's an RCMP in the other, and it's me in the vehicle behind. RCMP guy gets out. You know that magic power that RCMP have? They go out into an intersection and they do this, and magic happens, vehicles stop. And he did that so we could turn left, so we could keep going. It was when we were doing that left-hand turn that I got on the radio to Scott. And Scott saying, Vince, what can I do? I said, Scott, I'm giving you a field promotion. You are now net control. He didn't think it was funny. Scott has never done net control before. Scott is in a home somewhere between Okotoks and High River with a line of sight to High River. During a recent test, a recent set, if you will, we tested his signal with like 3 watts, point to point. It's awesome. 3 watts off a handy, so it's great line of sight into High River. But I quickly organized my thoughts on how to train him on how to do net control duties and say, here's what I need you to do, Scott. I need you to do scheduling. I need you to do figure out when resources are coming and going. I'm going to tell you what I need. You're going to tell me who you got available, and we'll figure it out from there. Oh, by the way, you need to keep control of the network. We have 11 fully linked radio repeaters covering 50,000 square kilometers of space. We had to keep control of that so that chit-chat, pardon me, and panic didn't set in with all the other people. So I'm driving from High River to Nanton, right? The 20-minute trip, and it takes me, an hour because of traffic. We only stopped here for 5 minutes. It's only a 60-kilometer trip. It took me an hour. The traffic was that thick because this major roadway was closed. We arrive at the backup EOC. It's the Nanton Fire Hall. Good news, TELUS cell phones work. Bad news, we don't have any landlines of our own. We landed up borrowing one, but these are all the inbound 911s for Nanton. Nanton is where reception hall is. The Hutterites are hosting 500 or 1,000 people in a community hall that have been displaced from their homes. Apparently the food was phenomenal for these people at the reception hall. I never did get there, but we were line of sight to the hub repeater at least. I could work it with a watt from my handy, and that's the hub repeater on the FARS network, not the provincial network. I was actually further away from that contact point, but we finally get the very desired sit-rep con call going between Edmonton and High River that they asked for some 7 hours earlier. 2 hours later, we pack it all up and we go back to High River because the water is receded and it only makes sense to be as close to the problem as you can be. I start really, by now I've got net control established, I've got operators in place. I now have to start thinking forward because I'm in charge of this thing. What do I start thinking about? I start to think that every 4 hours I have to stop and assess what I need to be doing in 18 and 36 hours. I need to have a plan to get me there all the time so that I can keep control of my resources so I don't burn people out, so I can serve the town and AHS as efficiently as I can. You think about staffing, rest, and future needs, and I probably didn't get enough rest during that. But I refined the local EOC operating structure, which in the local EOC, we're in an EOC you would normally do net control. I was in an EOC that was about 2/3 or maybe half the size of this room. There were 70 people in this room. I had no room to be running net control. There was no noise isolation. We were fortunate to have a pair of headphones, and that's why I broke net control off. I couldn't deal with net control. So net control was being held elsewhere where all the noise, and they could have all the noisy radio room they wanted, and it was 20 kilometers away. It was perfect. Because as hams, where's our place of work? It's a frequency, it's not a location. You can be anywhere and do this job. That's a learning I took away from my ICS 200 course at the AEMA a couple months ago. So I refined my local operating structure in the EOC to minimize the number of staff I needed. I needed somebody to be the EOC station, a node on the net, if you will. I needed a scribe, somebody to help them. I needed somebody, and that would be the lead operator that was dealing with Edmonton on the provincial channels and looking at the strategy of where to put people, and I needed a runner. And that's how we structured our EOC. And we were terrible at scribe too, by the way. You ever thought about this? You all know what this expression is, right? When all else fails, ham radio works or gets a message through, whatever it is. Whatever your version is, it's really true. That's what this has taught me. We all think it, and we're all really proud, and ARRL says it, and RAC says it, and IARU says it. This is very true. When the conventional communications network fails, when SMS can't get through because the cell sites are so overloaded in neighboring towns with all the influx of people that have been displaced from their own, this stuff still gets through. It's very humbling to think we're helping through this gigantic mess. By now it's about 12:30 Friday morning. I'm starting to lose steam. Dan is even worse than I am, and Ian is somewhere in between the two of us. So I send the two of those guys home. There's nobody available to relieve me, and Edmonton's on the radio with me because, of course, Aries has rules about keeping in touch with people. And it's, good health and safety and safety and welfare of people, but they're insisting on checking in with me every hour. And I'm like, guys, I need to sleep too. They said, yeah, we're checking in with you every hour. Cell phones are great things, smartphones. Even in this flood, you might say they're useless because I had no connectivity to the outside world. I had an alarm clock. I had something I could write notes on. You make use of the tools that are at hand. So this became my alarm clock. I set it for 55 minutes. I got up with my handy-talkie, groggy. I walked out from the bunk rooms where the firefighters would normally sleep onto the floor at the EOC. I said, Mr. Incident Commander, do you have any news for me? And he would say no, and I'd say thank you. And I'd call Edmonton and say there's no news. And I'd go back to sleep. And I did that 5 times that night. Time for a commercial break. I've been talking a lot about what my experiences were. That's day 1, by the way. The Foothills Amateur Radio Society has a fully linked hub and spoke style repeater network that covers 50,000 square kilometers. It uses a UHF full duplex backbone. We're VHF repeater society. We just actually we're in the midst of commissioning our first UHF repeater because there are no VHF frequency pairs left in Alberta. Historically, we provide flood watch. We monitor river levels. And we help out with a couple of parades per year in High River. From an event stats perspective, this was Alberta's first, High River was a Type 1 ICS response, most complex, highest urgency. 29 states of local emergency, including our first provincial state of emergency. Over 100,000 people were evacuated, and I'm uncertain of the whole number, but I know 100,000 went out in Calgary alone. And yeah, so Calgary had its own problems, by the way, and 13,000 in High River. The TELUS building in High River, right across the street from the town hall, the place where people were walking out in water up to their chest, the TELUS main switch for southern Alberta and most of southeastern BC is there. It lost electricity. It had a lot of batteries, but what happens when you've got a building running with a lot of battery-powered electronics in it and no fans? It gets a little warm. So the system collapsed under the heat load. I would later learn that at about 3 o'clock in the morning, sometime between when I was sleeping and when I was talking to Edmonton, some guys went in a little putt-putt motorboat with a gasoline-powered chop saw. They cut the door off because the cipher electronic locks were not working. They had to get the building open to start to cool it down. Phones did not come back for weeks. The Global Star downlink for sat phones is just outside of High River, and I know that's not the only sat phone company, but that was the point of interest. But around the area, we're also deploying to Medicine Hat and Lethbridge Hospital in case of further evacuations and further deployments. We were getting ready for it down there while this was going on up here. Lethbridge and Medicine Hat are in the far south of the province. A tornado warning was issued for the Nanton area. A sour gas was released in Turner Valley. Turner Valley is just north of Black Diamond. I'll show you the map in a second. But there was a need to evacuate homes. I don't know if you know what sour gas is. Hydrogen sulfide is really nasty stuff. A couple of heads in the room shaking. It smells like rotten eggs when it first comes out, and then it kills your smeller, kills your nose and your ability to smell. And then if you get to that point, you're probably dead. It can capture you very quickly. And it goes to low-lying areas. Turner Valley, low-lying area, very bad thing. But it looked like a non-event in the contrast of everything else that was going around. And I don't mean to be funny to say that. A tornado touchdown 3 days later in my hometown. I'm sitting on the deck Saturday night after we stand down and I hear tornado warning. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. How much worse can it get? Over 50 radio operators helped in the High River area over a course of 3 days. Turner Valley is just up here, just outside of Black Diamond. So, just up the street from the fire hall, this is the water. I'm looking north. This is the main roadway coming through town. And that's the roadway that was threatening to breach with water that was going to cut us off from the highway. It's 200 yards from the fire hall. The Heritage Inn that I talk about, where all the guys get together for Saturday breakfast and swap stories and tell lies, is just up the street from here. This is aimed at the leaders in the room. That's every one of you. You will all be a leader in this someday when you get the call. Some people are going to self-deploy, no matter how much you tell them not to. Prevent this. Prevent this through training, prevent this through procedure, prevent this through good sign-up, whatever that is. Some people will show up with 3 days worth of food and clothing. Promote this. Do whatever you have to get these people kitted up. Have kitting workshops. Have somebody come and show what their kit looks like. The lady that showed up in my EOC as my runner on day 3 has very restricted dietary needs. And she showed up with a hockey bag full of food because she was prepared, because she knew she couldn't get it at a conventional grocery store. Everybody's kit is going to be different. And some people will not be prepared. They will show up with no food and no idea. Sorry. You can't prevent that, right? I said earlier on that I tried to set operator expectations very clearly. It didn't matter. I still had somebody on the radio complaining that nobody was giving him a sandwich and a bottle of water. At least he was there to help. Your imperatives as leaders become clearly setting expectation to people And that doesn't mean during the event, but that means during your training. That means during your meetings as you talk about how you're going to plan all of these things. Safety and trapping of people, and keep a cool head. It was very easy for me to become overwhelmed, and you see me get emotional as I talk about this a year later. You have to keep a cool head yourself, or else others are going to do what you are doing. It helps to know your stuff. And by stuff, I mean your resources, your capabilities, and your people. Know your wireless capabilities. Rehearse for failure of any combination of resources. Boy, oh boy, did they all fail in any order during the flood. I was blown away at just how bad it was. And I'm an experienced radio operator. I like to think I am. Effective use of the resources is key, but remember, wireless doesn't just mean ham radio. We have many things at our disposal. Our talent is in communicating. And it's in communicating over what some people refer to as an older arcane method, but our talent is in communicating. So that could mean by SMS if it's up and running, by packet, by WinLink on HF, by CW, by whatever means. But you need to stay flexible. You know, many people believe that ICS is an org chart. Does everybody agree with that? Nobody agrees with that. That's the right answer. It's not an org chart. It's a structure. And in reality, we do many things to assist in that structure. We will do whatever is asked of us, contingent that we have the resources and availability and the ability to do that. Folks, it really helps to know your neighbors. Calgary Regional Areas is my neighbor. I'm very happy to say that. Ian would be proud if he was watching right now. But they were busy. They were trying to staff up for Canmore and Lethbridge. They were incredibly helpful to us. They sent us lots of people. They were monitoring a repeater that was, I don't know how far north. It would take me an hour and a quarter to drive there from High River, but I could hit it from my handy with 5 watts standing in the fire hall on the 2nd floor. Phenomenal footprint coverage repeater. So when I needed somebody and my phone wasn't working, and that was more often than not, I called out on the radio and I got to them. But we have overlapping memberships and geographies. Most of the Foothills Amateur Radio Society members actually come from the city of Calgary. They come to our meetings. They're members of multiple clubs. You know, a lot of people are, right? So you get on the air and you say, I need people. And, you know, Dan and Ian and they all said, yeah, I can come. And then I get a phone call from the guy in Calgary going, you just took 2 of my resources. They'd booked on with me. We didn't know that because we weren't communicating about booked resources in overlapping geographies because people want to help. You have to train your resources to say, you give your commitment one place and one place only, or you book off from that to book on to someplace else. Don't book in 2 places at once. That was a huge problem, more for Calgary than for us, because we were getting the people, because everybody wants to help. They want to come where the action is. They don't just want to sit by on a frequency and be on standby. Oh, by the way, the AMA definition of standby is you're staged on a frequency somewhere waiting for deployment, means you're ready to go in 3 minutes. So when you say, I'm ready, you're ready to go in 3 minutes. That's their definition. I think that's a little too tight, but somewhere in and around there isn't too far away from reality. Tactically, some stuff we did well. I spoke about this a bit earlier on. We have an excellent provincial resource guide, and it's about this thick, and I'm not lying when you print it all out. We segregated traffic on 4 frequencies at the High River EOC. We had net control on the main FARS network, and that was being run someplace else, and we were one of the stations that we would call into net control to pass our traffic. We had a simplex point-to-point to the hospital on a different frequency when we finally did get an operator in there. We had simplex around the site so we could keep in touch with each other, because we were frequently running around or stopping to get a breath of fresh air or going to use the porta potties that were out in the parking lot. And then we had the provincial Sarah backbone, which was taking us from north to south Alberta for communications back to Edmonton. We also had HF set up. We never did land up using HF. HF conditions on that weekend were terrible, quite frankly. We had an almost consistent use of tactical call signs across the province. That's something we need to improve upon. There were like 5 EOCs on the air. So when you're calling an EOC on the provincial frequency, do you call EOC? It's EOC calling? No, you call High River EOC, it's POC calling. But on the local frequencies, we were just EOC. So you have to get your tactical call signs straight very early on in the event so that you can keep your communications straight. And we stayed in touch with other Aries units across the province. And sometimes we were doing that at 2 in the morning. It didn't really matter. I picked up the phone, and if I had to talk to Curtis in Edmonton to say, here's what my situation is, he answered the phone. We're all there to help. All club egos were left behind at the door. That's a really important distinction to those of you that are involved in more than one club, and you know how sometimes clubs don't like other clubs and whatever, it's politics. There's no time for that, and people don't play in it. The photo shows here, from a people standpoint, we had this whiteboard. I had to fight to get a whiteboard marker because I didn't have one. We're in the backup EOC, so I kind of begged and pleaded, and I finally got one. I'm a colorful guy. I like 2 or 3 colors, but I had to settle for red. We always deployed 2 operators to each field location, and we did that for safety of the operator, and we did that so we could train operators. So I put an experienced person with a less experienced person. Great opportunity for learning. Oh, by the way, there's safety to each other. Oh, by the way, I'm always going to have somebody on the radio when I call at that site. Schedule shifts. Try and schedule 8-hour shifts. If you have to do 12s, okay. Mandatory off time in between. I had one guy, we needed a resource for, he stood down at one hall. Remember, I'm not doing scheduling, so I don't know this. He stood down at hall, and they needed an operator at another hall. He said, I'll go there. And I heard him en route. Yeah, and you're shaking your head at the back of the room, a few of you are. That's right. And that's what I did. I started shaking my head, and I got on the air, and I said, Josh, you're going home to rest. You're tired. I'm giving you an order. I'll run short at that site. You're not going out at 2 in the morning, half asleep. Something bad will happen. You need to keep tab on your resources through health and welfare checks. Who's where and who's on deck. And you know, you're seeing the side of Dan's beautiful head here, and a really blurry photo. I'm sorry, it's the best one I've got. I was a little too busy to take good photos, but it shows you, here's this shift, and here's the next shift coming on, who's in charge at that time, and who's the current in charge. So that when Incident Command wanted to go and say, who's in charge of the radio room, because we didn't have a radio room, I was a table in the corner of this hall, they knew who to look for. And they knew who to look for me because, you know, I'm wearing this very sexy jacket. From a net control perspective, we did a lot of good stuff, and there was a lot of opportunities to learn. We headed at Scott's house, 12 kilometers away from ground zero in a line of sight. EOC was simply another location for which net control handled the traffic. That allowed us in the EOC to focus on our job and not try to do net control at the same time. Because you can sure bet your sweet biffy that I had people coming up for me from logistics and from reception saying, I need this traffic passed, I need this traffic passed. If I was trying to do a net at the same time, I'd tear out what little of my hair is left. I'm really glad we had net control elsewhere. We had a team of 7 in net control doing scheduling for all the teams, net control and radio operator, scribe, and a cook. Because there was one non-operator there, I think it was a daughter of one of the operators, and she was cooking for the entire team. People were sleeping at Scott's house. He has a nice house, nice big house, kind of off in the middle of the country. It was a great arrangement. We will do this again. Now, they need some training on how to do it better, but we'll use Scott's location again. He says you can use it anytime. I could fill 4 hours with photos of boats sitting in strange places. There's a boat dealer in town. He's, you know, you can see the rail lines going through town. Trains don't pass on these tracks. They haven't for 5 years. The tracks are now being ripped out to make way for other things. But about a mile up the tracks is a boat dealership. You'll see a photo of some boats coming over the train tracks a bit later on. The photos are positively frightening too. This boat was located here for weeks, and you can see somebody even took a moment to tie it off so that it... Ladies and gentlemen, this is the tip of the iceberg to the surreal you will see. You have to get used to the surreal. It's really important that you don't overthink what you're seeing. You have to think about let your brain do the processing, make your decisions, and move on. You don't have time to think about how in the name of God did this boat get here and who tied it up and why would they... You don't have time. Get it out of your head. Worry about it when you give a presentation next time. It's Friday morning. I've gotten up. We're now starting to fall into some sort of a sequence. Thursday night was snooze fest. There were 5 people in the EOC. There were a whole pile of people resting. because we had no communication. 7 of the 9 sewer lifts were down. 13 of the 15 wells for fresh water had been fouled. We were running off the reservoir that was in the towns in the water tower. We had no flush toilets. Porta potties arrived overnight. All these things are going on. So it was a quiet night, though, overall in the town. So the SITREP meeting at 07:30, we start to understand what the situation is, and we start to fall into a pattern. And the pattern is incident command says, I need a report from liaison, I need a report from risk, I need a report from planning, operations, logistics. They go through the whole circle. I need a report from radio. We were giving reports alongside all these other units. I greet the 0800 shift of operators. I had people that I had forgotten that I knew. I've only been in Alberta 6 months. I used to do an awful lot of radio events. I had all these guys I was doing all these K100 and this fun run and these car rallies on, showing up in my parking lot to volunteer. I could have given them all great big hugs. It was so good to see them again, and I had no time to say, it's nice to see you again, thank you for being here, because I had to get them deployed. We finally get operators on the hospital 08:30 because the water is receded enough. We can get them in by a front-end loader, but I'm not letting them drive their own personal vehicles in. And so here's the strangest thing for me, was that AEMA, Alberta Emergency Management Agency, I haven't said that yet in this presentation, is here doing all these planning presentations and planning meetings on how to reopen the town. We haven't finished evacuating it yet, but they're leading the town's leadership through. You have to think about getting gas stations open, getting grocery stores open, getting hotels open, getting restaurants and Tim Hortons open because people need their coffee, building supply places open, and they started building a reopening plan. Because I don't know if that existed, and I say that respectfully, I just have no knowledge. But they started leading us through workshops in the middle of all this other stuff going on. We're in the bay where they fixed the fire trucks. I'm 30 feet away from where all the medical triage is being done, and we're standing here at a whiteboard, and it's one of those surreal moments again. He's talking about how we opened the town up in 7 days. And they wanted us there so that we could help as radio guys. I'm finally realizing at about noontime that I'm getting tired, so I haven't had a whole lot of sleep. I've been running on adrenaline. Somebody in the back of the room is shaking their head. They've been there before. And so I head home from some sleep. I can't sleep. I'm tired. I can't sleep. Too wired up. I wake up. I talk to my wife. I probably had a shower, which was a luxury that nobody in High River had. And I went back to the EOC. Now I'm getting a real hard time getting through the checkpoint. I'm like holding up my Alberta Health Services badge. That's my employer. And it's got my name on it and my picture. I'm giving them my driver's license. I've got all this radio gear on my big long F-350 truck. I got lots of antennas because I'm a ham. I got these yellow blinky lights. I got signs that say emergency communications. They're not letting me in. And then they found my name finally on a list. Now the list was about this thick by that point of who was allowed in. And they had 4 lists going because they weren't really well organized. It's 36 hours after the event, right? I get back in, it's Friday evening, at about 1800. As I'm driving by, the Heritage Inn is flooded. I know I'm not going to be there for breakfast for a while. We went and had our breakfast in Okotoks for a while. It was still just about as nice. Somehow, I learned that the hospital is being evacuated. I missed this. I was too busy dealing with the guys in Edmonton to be listening to the local radio traffic, despite having 4 VFOs on my vest. So the hospital is being evacuated. 250 people are being moved, and long-term care people as well. But the town spent the day understanding their options and their position. And sometime through the course of the day, these guys arrived. You're looking at a satellite dish which provided us internet. They started to set it up Friday evening. By Saturday morning, it was fully functional. Sometime probably in the wee hours of Saturday. And the tower truck is a cell site on wheels. TELUS couldn't get us one. These guys got us one. Virgin Technologies out of Edmonton. Shameless plug. But for me, this was a first sign that some things were starting to normalize, was that we were seeing comms coming back and plans for comms. Friday to the wee hours of Saturday, we spent the days handling traffic to and from AHS, to and from the reception centers, trying to understand where else we needed to put people. By then, the team was really well established and really entrenched and in place. The evacuation of the hospital completes at 23:30. I have a chat with Joel, the operator, who happens to work in the next building over from me, at about 23:45 out in the parking lot, and it's cool, and it's about 8 degrees, and the stars are out, and it's Another one of those surreal moments. We're just chatting about his experiences here, and I'm having a debrief with him so he can go home with a clear mind. And then one of the AHS guys comes up to me, and he's the ambulance superintendent for the district. And he says, I got to go back to the hospital, and I got to get my laptop so I can be productive, but I'm not sure I can get in. My job at AHS gives me a magic pass card. And I said, I'll get you in, let's go. I jumped at the chance because I have been in an EOC for 48 hours. You hear about everything and you see nothing. You are totally disconnected from the reality of what's going on around you. So for me, it was an opportunity to go and see with my own eyes and try and absorb. We leave the fire hall, it's pitch black in the town of High River. And we're driving along roads that have this much mud on them. And so that makes kind of an ugly sloshy noise underneath your tires as you're driving by. And I see RVs halfway out into the middle of the street where the helicopter was landing earlier, 12th Avenue. I see boats. I saw that boat on the train tracks. It never moved. I saw boats up on people's lawns. Apparently there's a boat that had driven itself through somebody's house with the force of the floodwater. I never did see that one, through the front of the house and destroyed it. My backup arrives as I come back from the hospital. He had just come off hospital shift, and I said to Fred, can you stick around for a few hours? I urgently need some sleep. He says, yes, I'm good to go. I slept most of the day before I did my shift. So Fred did about 16 hours. And then he went to sleep in his van outside in the parking lot. While he was asleep outside in the parking lot, the Canadian military arrived. I'm jumping ahead a couple of slides, and they set up a bison. To Vince, this looks like a tank. I don't know the difference between a tank and a personnel carrier, but it's a green thing that has a gun on it. So to me, it's a tank. A bison is a personnel carrier that's a mobile communication station with a tent that sticks out the back, and they put up these portable masts that are about 65 feet tall. These guys, 300 of them arrived overnight, and they parked right beside Fred. I'm told this vehicle isn't quiet. He slept right through it. But that night, I get some uninterrupted sleep in the kitchen. The kitchen is also the RCMP office. I slept on the couch. They didn't tell me if I snored too much. Time for a bit about what's going on in an EOC. Everybody said, what's it like in an EOC during the event? Let me tell you. It's controlled chaos. Best way to describe it. Everybody knows their job and they execute it. Everybody hangs out and listens during sit rep. You can hear a pin drop in the room. It's critical information that everybody needs to hear as each person says their turn and go through. This is your only chance to exchange information. Remember, radios aren't working, email's not working, cell phone's not working, voice in a room is the only way you share data with what's going on, about how many sewage stations are offline or online or whatever. It's noisy and hot. We were incredibly cramped. Like I said, the room is probably 2/3 the size of this, and we have 70 people in it. You adjust your radio equipment on the fly. One of the pieces of kit that we'd built up for the floods was a crossband repeater with a couple of Motorola radios back to back with a RIC and a power supply. We ended up tearing that all apart and doing something else with it because we needed radios on the site. It's difficult to adjust your radio equipment on the fly. This was a necessity for us because we didn't have enough gear working in this backup EOC. But sometimes this happens. The logistics team is now growing to meet the expanding needs, and these people were sitting right beside me. They grew from 2 to 20, I'm sure. It's a hive of activity, and you can see our radio table in the back corner with the wires dangling down from the ceiling. What I was saying earlier about mag mount on the ceiling tiles right here, right where these things cross over, they make excellent mag mounts. And the antennas are out of the way. Just don't get the really big long whip, just get the short one. If you only need a few watts to hit your repeater, it works. I said it earlier, you hear about everything, but you see nothing. You're really removed from reality. It's a controlled chaos. It's hot, it's noisy, it's cramped, it's noisy, it's overwhelming, it's noisy. Did I say it's noisy? It's very loud in there. This room in particular had a hard floor. It was tile floor. It wasn't carpeted like this. Oh, my kingdom for a little bit of carpeting to deaden the noise. It's like a Hollywood movie, and I might have said that a few times tonight. The lady that worked with me, my runner, Tammy, on Saturday, she says, oh my God, that incident commander, he's intense. He's like a movie actor. This was Ross normally, and this was just who he was. He's focused, he's decisive, he's quick, he doesn't mince words, he's professional. And I told Ross I'd work with him again. He's just about to retire, and he says, I'm never doing that again, Vince, don't worry. But look, it's not for the faint of heart. It is a very strong, emotionally charged atmosphere. Now, As I go through my ICS 200 training led by AEMA, they would say to me, the one thing that was different about the high river floods from most other Type 1 responses is the incident command and all the people that were working in the EOC were traumatized. They were people that floated downstream and lost their houses and didn't know about their families and pets. They had other things on their mind, but they were doing their jobs. It is very different and very emotionally charged. It is not for the faint of heart, but there's room for smart operators to shadow. And Tammy was one of those operators that was rather new, but she was very smart, and she knew how to stay close, and she knew what the right thing to say was and when not to say things. What happens in the EOC is in an incident like that is the operations of the town. We need to get bottled water in the hospital. We need to get the dark hotels opened up for the EOC workers to sleep in because they're sleeping in tents on the grass or they're sleeping in the back of their vehicles because there's no place for people to go because the town's been evac'd. In particular, I'm listening to the logistics people sitting right beside me on the phone to the owners of Super 8, and the Super 8's going, no, the town's been evacuated. No, you don't understand. I'm calling from the town of High River. I need you to come and open this building. No, we won't do that. There's no electricity. There's too much liability. Come and open it. We will pay you so that people can sleep in the beds. They're arguing with these people to get their hotels opened. It happened to be the one part of town that was dry. It's just there's no power there. Get the evacuation completed, get food for reception halls, decide on a security plan for the town. It's the craziest things that people will do when they want to get back into their houses when they've been evacuated. Now this town, if you remember the news, people were evacuated for up to a month from their homes. And they're like, I can see it from over there. It's 500 yards away. There's no water there. Why can't I go? Well, because the sewers aren't working and every time you flush it comes up in somebody else's backyard is why, is the answer that the mayor was giving. A very smart answer, I might add. People will get very creative to break the state of local emergency and the law that it comes along with that to get back to their homes. So you have to get really creative on your security. So we started doing colored tags. And this was suggested to, the military suggested it to the town. They said, yeah, Wednesday is yellow and the city name is, the country name is Spain. Thursday it's red and it's Canada. Friday it's yellow and it's America. And if you were holding one of these passes, they were good from noon until noon the next day. If you didn't have a pass, you couldn't get back in. So it's imperative for me to get a pass before I left or else I was not getting back in no matter what the list said. So it was a two-step approach. You had to be on the list and you had to get the pass. And then figure out staff parking, because now the fire hall's parking lot's getting really overwhelmed. What's not on the job description? Using a porta potty in the middle of the night. Being the resident expert on two-way radio, this guy comes walking into the EOC and he says, hi, this is my card. I have 100 radios and a repeater. Where do you want them? And the incident commander grabs me by the collar, almost. He says, come here. My runner follows me, the scribe follows us. 5 of us go into this little tiny bunk room that the volunteer firefighters use to sleep in. That becomes our impromptu meeting office. Vince, what are these radios capable of? What can I do with them? How far will they reach? Will they be sufficient? Are they good quality? I don't know. They're Motorola XTR 1000s. They're pretty good radios, I think. I'm all of a sudden the expert on the town's two-way radios. That's not on my job description. You're helping out however you can. I had to do some research to give them that answer. By then I had a little bit of internet connectivity on my phone. And begging for whiteboard markers and post-it notes. I'll never go without whiteboard markers and post-it notes again. I get some sleep. I wake up Saturday morning, go out to the porta potty, I see the fire trucks. This is new. The fire trucks have been on the road continuously for 36 hours rescuing people. All of a sudden they're parked out front of the fire hall. Because inside the fire hall, it's now a makeshift reception hall. And it's a place of business now. They can't even go in their own fire hall. It's the strangest thing to see these fire trucks sitting there quiet, shiny, clean. I'm up at 05:30. I said the military arrived, and I told you Fred didn't even hear him. Dan took this picture of me at the sit rep, standing beside the military, giving our report. You know, I'm wearing the sexy jacket. There's 70 people in the room, designated for 20. There's 2 MLAs, 1 senator, town staff, a major, a colonel. And then 2 hours later, a hush falls across the room as the provincial premier arrives, and that's Alison Redford right there. And you can't really see the photo all that well, but she's wearing a red sweater. And the incident commander starts giving her a briefing, which lands up giving the aid package to the town of High River, the financial aid that they'd need to try and recover the town. But at the SITREP on Saturday, it's announced that telecellular is back thanks to the cow that has rolled in. So that cow testing happened while I was sleeping. That means I can start my withdrawal planning, because remember, I know that water is going downstream to Lethbridge and Medicine Hat. I have to get resources freed up to go there because I'm always planning 18 to 36 hours ahead, and I'm evaluating my position every 4 hours to know what to do with my staff, to my team members. So I begin the withdrawal planning at 0800. We build up our plan. We have a meeting with the IC at 9:30 and said, this is our plan to withdraw. We were here to support you for communications. You'll have communications back up. It's already working for you. Are you comfortable with us leaving? Yes was the answer. We execute our withdrawal plan. We assist the town to ensure they've got working phone links and working emails, and they know how to get in touch with each other. And I start standing down resources, and I go, whoops, damn. That lady doesn't have a phone. She communicates with the reception halls. All of a sudden, I got to scramble to get her a phone. Half an hour later, we're out of there. We moved. Tom Cox, V6 Talks. Some of the people in the room know Tom. He says hello, by the way. He used to be VA7 Talks from St. John's Ambulance. He took the photo of us. Our table is clean in the back of the room now. And yeah, the only thing different is I have a little less hair now, and I've got a black one, a black radio pouch instead of a blue one. He took a really nice photo for us. We were pleased with that. This is what the parking lot at the fire hall looked like as we're departing. You can see the RCMP's mobile operation station. You can see the back of the tent, and the front of it would be the Bison, that thing that was a tank or a communications vehicle or whatever. You can see all the porta potties lined up. You'll see a food truck there. He was there continuously for 3.5 weeks. He was serving 3 different meals a day. They were hot meals. They were wonderful food. I'm never worried if I'm ever deployed to an EOC. There will be food. I like working at an EOC because there's food. I'm driving out of town, and somewhere between, here and the highway is the place where we have breakfast on Saturdays, and it's Saturday. I'm driving past tanks and military, and there's more. Now, you might be wondering why the military is parked at the top of an on-ramp to the highway. The off-ramp is where the checkpoint was. People will drive past the checkpoint, and they'll back up and come around up the on-ramp. These guys were there to prevent that. Like I said, people were getting real creative. The highways were totally empty, but the town of Okotoks, the next nearest town, and the town of Nanton, the next nearest town south, are absolutely buzzing with people because the town's empty. They've got to go somewhere. Cellular networks are busy. The roads are busy. I mentioned earlier that Scott's House was to be our field day site. It had food and beverages waiting for us thanks to Scott and Christine's generosity and hospitality. So we went there. We had a meal and some social time. We swapped some stories, and we debriefed. Debriefing is really important after you've been through that kind of an event. Debrief with your dog if you need to when you go home, but debriefing is important. It's a mental release. We talked about ideas, what worked and what didn't. I took 15 pages of notes. Scott took 10. 25 people were there, and it really became the core of our lessons listed. I said earlier on, there's a difference between lessons listed and lessons learned. Lessons learned are when you do it right the next time based upon the lessons you've listed from the last time. We all call it lessons learned. It really isn't. The Alberta government recognized the amateur radio emergency service in a meeting, and I just pulled one slide out of the deck. It was talking about the southern Alberta flooding at large. And you can see all of the ARES units and all of the places we had people. How did we structure ourselves on the air? Edmonton Provincial Operations Center was on SARA, the SARA Link network, and on HF. Red Deer was net control for the provincial SARA backbone. They were controlling that traffic. And that's good because that's where the techies on the SARA net live. So the techies were running that net control. And if there was a problem with net, we had the right people right there in front of the radios or with the screwdrivers. Calgary Control was on a repeater called the RYC machine, which is placed up high on Nose Hill. It was the one that I could hit with my handy talkie with 5 watts from 50 kilometers away. 14685 with a tone of 110.9. High River and area net control was on the FARS network, all 11 repeaters all over the province. High River EOC was using 4 frequencies in total, and I outlined them earlier, including the FARS network. And we discovered, and I mentioned this before I began the presentation formally, but the Aries and the RACES HF frequencies don't align. So that's just something to be aware of until ARRL and RAC make a move to change them or fix them, however you wish to say that. But be aware of that. You might land up in the middle of a contest or something as you're trying to use your frequencies. And I think people are smart enough to move away in that case anyway. What did we learn? We learned the Sarah backbone didn't go everywhere we needed it. It didn't go to Canmore. It doesn't go to Medicine Hat. There were some Herculean efforts from people driving from Edmonton to get a crossband link from an IRLP node somewhere, something, to get to Medicine Hat, because the Sarah network doesn't go there yet. We will change that. But the flooding wasn't just about High River. This was a provincial-wide event where the core of the catastrophe from a communications perspective was where I was. Next time in the EOC, we need to do some things better. I had the luxury and the opportunity to sit with Ross, the IC, about a month ago. And I said, Ross, what could I have done better for you? And he said, people weren't really sure why you were there. And I kind of went, huh? Yeah, a few of you got some puzzled looks, just like me. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, you could have done more things for us, but people didn't know what your capabilities were. Huh, heads are nodding now. No, your people, your resources, and your abilities, right? So we didn't advertise our abilities and our capabilities to the town enough so they could leverage the best of us. We were passing traffic. There was so much more we could have been doing had they known what we were capable of and where we had people. Now, Ross says, in fairness, he's the top guy on the drawing, the ICS drawing, and he says his staff below may have known our capabilities, but he didn't. All he knew were we could get messages through. But at the end of the day, maybe that's all that matters. But I took that feedback for what it was worth. We learned our EOC wasn't equipped enough. We need a whiteboard, markers, and an eraser. We need a clock. Boy, you guys got lots of clocks here, and I've taken all kinds of photos of your setup here to take back to my teams to share with them, because you guys got a great setup here. You have no idea. We need a clock. We didn't have one. You remember I was telling you about the cell phone earlier? Your cell phone becomes your clock. I was doing this an awful lot going, oh yeah, it's 2038. Hey, thanks, Curtis. My friend Curtis has just sent me a message and I saw it on my phone. We need some basic office supplies, a clipboard, paper, pens. We didn't have that in a kit. We need dedicated radios and power supplies. As the military says, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. And I'm going to make darn sure that those future EOC radios are identical models, pre-programmed, and a quick and dirty how do you use it sheet is laid out in front of them. They're going to be the same model. They're also going to have some headsets and external speakers on an AB switch, because as I'm sitting in the corner of a really noisy room, I have to listen with some headphones so I can hear what's going on around me. But all of a sudden, I need to have somebody else come and listen, like the person who's coordinating the traffic to the reception hall. She's saying, I want to talk to the person at Blackie. And so all of a sudden, you have to unplug the headphones so they can listen to it on the speaker so that they can talk with their friend or talk with their coworker and get the message across, rather than 2 ham radio guys getting in the middle of what could be a complex message. Sometimes it's just easier to put 2 people who have never used a radio before on the mic, right? An AB switch makes that really easy. Excuse me, and we will have multiple inputs for headphones so that 2 and 3 people can listen at a time. We're in this room, and this room that holds 20 people, that we have 70, and we're doing the sit rep, and you can hear a pin drop. It's supposed to be so quiet. You can't have a blast coming across from the radio. All your volume controls got to be turned down. Headphones are mandatory, and the ability to switch rapidly between headphones and speakers is very helpful. You have a really nice radio room here. You've got some sound isolation. That's not as much of an issue for you guys. But you might land up in a school gymnasium one day, like we did at a fire hall. And we need a team scribe. We need somebody who understands what a scribe is, because, we're ham radio operators. We're not necessarily great at writing down the message we passed. We just know to pass it. You write it down, but you don't keep a log of what time and what message was. You're too busy doing other things. So I needed a 5th person in the EOC as a scribe. I didn't know that until after the event. From a net control perspective, I spoke earlier about Scott and Scott's team's capabilities, largely experienced but incredibly dedicated operators. There's lots of improvements available here. That's not to say that in any way, shape, or form was I disappointed at the job they did. By far, no. I was blown away at the job they did, considering they'd never done it before. I gave them some loose structure. Scott used his natural leadership skills, and he got it running and kept it running really well. But they needed a team scribe. They started to scribe notes, and then Scott, as he's going through the post review with me, and he took 10 pages of notes that day when I took 15, he said that he realized that he didn't take his scribe's notes consistently. And that becomes difficult as we're trying a month and two later to understand what happened. But I give full kudos, I can't talk straight, to Scott's team that was built from high-level instructions that I gave them while I was trying to turn left on the highway that we couldn't get a break in the traffic. For me, I have to breathe. As you can tell, and you've been very polite in listening to me for a little over an hour now, I'm a pretty intense guy and I'm pretty passionate. I tend to be in with both feet when I'm doing something. But I need to learn to breathe and take a break for myself. I don't do that often enough, so it's very important for me to learn this. I'm incredibly highly organized. I talked about the Rubbermaid bins that were labeled, one with an antenna kit, one with power cable supplies. I don't own a Go kit. I still managed to grab a couple 100 pounds of supplies that I needed and get out of my house in 40 minutes. But I could cut that down to 15 if I was more organized and had a dedicated kit. You know, what's a kit cost, though? A couple of handy talkies, a couple of batteries, drop-in charger, power cords, extension cables, all that stuff. There's some budgetary considerations too, right? But I need to build a co-kit for clothing, food, and water, and radio and technology. I started off talking about all I wanted to do was field day. I really like field day. It's a lot of fun. You get to go out in the wild open, and you get to deal with wet feed lines, smoking your antenna tuner when you're trying to work a pile up on PSK on 20 meters. Yeah, that happened to me 5 years ago. You get to try and put up a mast that you've never seen before. You hope that the ropes don't snap, and because people don't wear steel toes or helmets. Field day's a lot of fun, and there's a contest involved too, and you know, I'm a contester, right? I just want to do field day. I started off calling this story, the story of the High River floods. We don't need no stinking field day. But I didn't want it to be derogatory towards ARRL or field day. But I did file this field day report with ARRL. From the top it says, call sign V6FAR, Foothills Amateur Radio Society, number of participants 50 plus, entry class check, only one, EOC station, power source, generator, commercial mains, ARRL section, Alberta, total QSL points, lots. Total phone QSOs, lots. Total phone QSO points, unmeasurable, see attached. It was my after action report. It was 3 pages long. Power multiplier, 150 watts or less, yes. Media publicity, set up in a public place, site visited by elected official, agency official, educational activity bonus. Yeah, we were training operators as we went. I clicked it all off. I sent it into ARRL. I never heard from them because I learned that I had to mail it in. Since the event, Foothills Amateur Radio Society has been applying for grants like crazy. Wally, the EC, is a grant-asking machine, and he's been going off and applying for grants all over the place. We've received a $5,000 grant from Rotary International. That's what's funding our UHF repeater project. We run a UHF backbone today, so that means all of a sudden we can't have a UHF repeater and UHF backbone. We're going to use microwave. We're going to embed voice over IP and use RLC 404 controllers using the latest TCP/IP technology. If we hang those on a network like the city of North Vancouver has, you can put up a repeater someplace else, and as long as you got network connectivity, your repeaters are linked. You don't need to worry about a radio link anymore. These are very cool technology. And we, as we understand from the manufacturer, we'll be the first people in North America to get them into production. As I was talking to you fine folks at supper about it, I'm pretty excited about this project, and I'm not even the lead tech on it. We have planned to be able to do internet over RF through this stuff, either through microwave link or through UHF or whatever. We want to do WinLink. We need EOC radios. We need packet and APRS. I could go on and on forever. We need more money. We're a 25 or 30 person club. 25 or 30 people times $35 a year doesn't exactly bring in a lot of income. We're working on that. Let me show you some photos. I was going to call this dirty pictures, but that might sound bad. These are the boats from the commercial boat sales place. They're running over the train tracks. This is, I think the photo was taken on the bridge. There's a bridge that almost wiped out, main bridge into town. I later learned one of these boats embedded itself in the side of a house, punctured it. Any vehicle that could have been used for rescues was used. You're seeing from back to front, you're seeing boat, front end loader, that's a manure truck, and another boat. People didn't really care if it was a manure truck, it was rescuing them. They had to climb up a 12-foot ladder to get into it to stand in the back of a box that used to carry stuff. Combines. Again, if you remember the shot with the helicopter landing there that was taken with the telephoto lens, you're looking in the opposite direction at the same intersection, all very near the fire hall. Look at the rain coming down. I couldn't believe how heavy the rain was as I left Calgary to start to drive to Okotoks. My wipers were on high. I was driving at 70 kilometers an hour because I could, and the road limits are 110. I couldn't see if I went any faster. My windows are fogging up, steaming up like crazy. There was so much rain coming down. This is an environmental cleanup truck, Clean Harbors. And people are just sitting on the rail and they're hanging on. And, by here the water's not as deep anymore. But back up a couple blocks and it's 2 and 3 feet deep. Any vehicle that could be used was. They did hundreds and hundreds of rescues. And I thank Tom Cox for all these photos, by the way, until they themselves needed to be rescued. Ladies and gentlemen, that's my presentation to you this evening. I welcome your questions. Thank you.